Okay, so now we're recording, and I was mentioning just before that we actually have a new follower, BladZ5005. So, and they joined us around 6 hours ago, it looks like. So, cool, thank you so much. Yeah, happy Father's Day! I'm curious. I'm going to change to my other layout for a second because I'm wondering if that will update, because we have a little follower count, and I'm wondering if it updates automatically or if it's something that I have to go in and physically change. Let me just see really quickly. No, I gotta change that. Okay. Alright. No worries. I will go in and change that. It's fine. You know what? Let me do that now while I'm here. Okay. Why won't it let me, why wouldn't it let me change it? That's very weird. Okay. Oh. Okay, I thought that would help. That's really weird that it won't let you adjust it. I was like, did we lose someone so we only have 25 now? Or what? Well, I remember having to put in the initial values. I had to put those in myself. Yeah, that's so weird. Yeah, so I remember having to put those initial values in as well, so I'm not too surprised that it doesn't update automatically, but it is very strange that it looks like you can't change it. Weird. It's a problem for another time. We still have to figure out the tipping situation too, because from my knowledge, there's no area to tip to that it would make an alert pop up on screen, which is what I want to happen if anyone does tip. We do have that donate button, which is great, but I also wanted to try to make it so this way Streamlabs will also give a notification and we can see our cute little donating notification when that stuff happens. So that's something we're gonna have to go in. That's something we're gonna have to go in and check and work on ourselves. What do you mean it increases incrementally? No. I had to put the values in myself initially. So I had to say that we're looking to get 50 and that we currently have 25. So it's not that it's like, oh, well, it'll only update every 5 or only update every... No, that's not how it goes at all. No, it's not a smart widget. I'm just getting to the Twitch chat on my phone. I don't usually need it on these days because I'm not switching my screen or anything, but it'll just help, so... Okay. If you guys are ready, then we're all set and ready to move on with Quoth the Author, with the Midnight Library. Okay. Okay. Grab my book. So, again, for the copy of the book that is like this, it is page 197 that we are starting on. Let me just see about a possible end point before we get going. Okay. Do I need coffee? What do you mean, do I need coffee? Sorry, I'm just waiting to see why coffee. Did I yawn? I don't remember yawning. I went like that. Either way, no, don't need coffee, just don't need coffee, I'm good. Not tired, really. Okay, so we're on a gentle life. It turned out that this particular existence was quite easy to slip into. Sleep was good in this life, and she didn't wake up until the alarm went off at... Wait, what? Oh. Why did I think that this book was in first person for some reason? I just had like a... I just blanked for a second, I guess. Okay. Sleep was good in this life, and she didn't wake up until the alarm went off at 8:15. She drove to work in a tatty old... See, it's funny because the car is a Hyundai. In English, we call it Hyundai, but it's actually Hyundai, and I'm pretty sure it's Hyundai, technically. Like, it's a Korean car, and the way you would pronounce that is, like, Hyundai. But we just don't, for some reason, here. So, I don't think I've ever talked about it in chat, but I study Korean. Yeah, I study Korean, so my instinct is not to pronounce it as Hyundai. But anyway, so okay. She drove to work in a tatty old Hyundai. That smelled of dogs and biscuits and was decorated with crumbs, passing the hospital and the sports center, and pulling up in the small car park outside the modern gray-bricked single-story rescue center. She spent the morning feeding and walking the dogs. The reason it was quite easy to blend into this life was at least partly because she had been greeted by an affable, down-to-earth woman with brown curly hair and a Yorkshire accent. The woman, Pauline, said Nora was to start work in the dog shelter rather than the cat shelter, and so Nora had a legitimate excuse to ask what to do and look confused. Also, the issue of knowing people's names was solved by the fact that all the workers had name badges. Nora had walked a bull mastiff, a new arrival, around the field behind the shelter. Pauline told her that the bull mastiff had been horribly treated by its owner. She pointed out a few small round scars. Cigarette burns. Nora wanted to live in a world where no cruelty existed, but the only words she had available to her were worlds with humans in them. The bull mastiff was called Sally. She was scared of everything: her shadow, bushes, other dogs, Nora's legs, grass, air, though she clearly took a liking to Nora and even succumbed to a very quick tummy rub. Later, Nora helped clean out some of the little dog huts. She imagined they called them huts because it sounded better than cages, which was really a more apt name for them. There was a three-legged Alsatian? Alsatian. I want to say that's Alsatian. I know, it is terrible. Sorry, also, like, I said it the other day, but if you see any, like, twitchiness with this eye, I really apologize. I think my eyes are just really dry right now. And so it's been a little twitchy. I hear that it's not really noticeable to anybody who's actually, like, looking at me. Just me, apparently, but, just in case. Alsatian. Yeah, I thought so. Okay, cool. Thank you. Cool. There was a three-legged Alsatian called Diesel, who had been there a while, apparently. When they played catch, Nora discovered his reflexes were good, his mouth catching the ball almost every time. She liked this life, or, more precisely, she liked the version of herself in this life. She could tell the kind of person she was from the way from the way people spoke to her. It felt nice, comforting, solidifying, to be a good person. Her mind felt different here. She thought a lot in this life, but her thoughts were gentle. Compassion as the basis of morality, the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer had written in one of his softer moments. Maybe it was the basis of life, too. There was one man who worked there called Dylan who had a natural way with all the dogs. He was about her age, maybe younger. He had a kind, gentle, sad look about him, his long surf-dewed hair golden as a retriever. He came and sat next to Nora on a bench at lunch, overlooking the field. "What are you having today?" he asked, sweetly nodding to Nora's lunchbox. She honestly didn't know. She'd found it already prepared when she'd opened her magnet and calendar-cluttered fridge that morning. She peeled off the lid to find a cheese and Marmite Oof, I hear Marmite is kind of icky. I guess I've never had it. I just have heard many horror stories. A cheese and Marmite sandwich and a packet of salt and vinegar crisps. That sounds like a very bitter lunch. Marmite is a spread that you put on, usually on bread. I hear that it's pretty salty. There's two, so in the UK, they mainly have Marmite, and then actually in Australia, they have something called Vegemite. I think Marmite actually has a meat base, but don't quote me on it, I'm not entirely sure. Whereas Vegemite obviously has a vegetable base. But apparently they taste very similar, and they're very salty, and not too many people like them. But cheese, maybe the cheese, I guess it depends what kind of cheese. I'm thinking too much about the sandwich. But, like, I guess maybe the cheese could be, okay, so, like, barley then. So, I'm wondering if the cheese is maybe a sweet cheese that, I don't know, like, the salty and sweet might work together, like salted caramel. What's it called? And then salt and vinegar chips are also, bitter. Like, I like salt and vinegar chips. Salt and vinegar chips are some of my favorite kinds of chips, but it's just double trouble with the Marmite and cheese sandwich and the, salt and vinegar chips. The sky darkened and the wind picked up. "Oh, crap," Nora said. "It's going to rain." "Maybe, but the dogs are still in their cages." "Sorry? Dogs can smell when rain is coming, so they often head indoors if they think it's going to happen. Isn't that cool? That they can predict the future with their nose? Yes, said Nora. Way cool. Nora bit into her cheese sandwich, and then Dylan put his arm around her. Nora jumped up. The hell? She said. Dylan looked deeply apologetic, and a little horrified at himself. I'm sorry. Did I hurt your shoulder? No. No, it's fine. She discovered that Dylan was her boyfriend and that he had gone to the same secondary school as her, Hazeldean Comp, and that he was 2 years younger. Nora could remember the day her dad died, when she was in the school library staring as a blonde boy from a couple of years below ran past outside the rain-speckled window, either chasing someone or being chased. That had been him. She had vaguely liked him from a distance, but without really knowing him or thinking about him at all. You all right, Norster? Dylan asked. Norster? Yeah, I was just... Yeah, I'm fine. Nora sat down again, but left a bit more bench between them. There was nothing overtly wrong with Dylan. He was sweet, and she was sure that in this life she genuinely liked him. Maybe even loved him, but entering a life wasn't the same as entering an emotion. By the way, did you book Gino's? Gino's. The Italian. Nora had gone there as a teenager. She was surprised it was still going. What? Gino's? The pizza place? For tonight? You said you kind of know the manager there. My dad used to, yeah. So, did you manage to call? Yes, she lied, but actually it is fully booked. On a weeknight? Weird. That's a shame. I love pizza. And pasta. And lasagna. And... Right, said Nora. Yes, I get it. I completely get it. I know, it was strange, but they had a couple of big bookings. Dylan already had his phone out. He was eager. I'll try La Cantina. You know, the Mexican. Tons of vegan options. I love a Mexican, don't you? I love a Mexican, don't you? Nora couldn't think of a legitimate reason for her not to do this, aside from Dylan's not entirely riveting conversation, and compared to the sandwich she was currently eating and the state of the rest of her fridge, Mexican food sounded promising. So Dylan booked them a table, and they carried on talking as dogs barked in the building behind them. It emerged during the conversation that they were thinking of moving in together. We can watch Last Chance Saloon, he said. She wasn't really listening. What's that? He was shy, she realized. Bad with eye contact. Quite endearing. You know, that Ryan Bailey film you wanted to watch? We saw the trailer for it. You said it's meant to be funny, and I did some research, and it has an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's on Netflix, so... She wondered if Dylan would believe her if she told him that in one life she was a lead singer of an internationally successful pop-rock band and global icon who had actually dated and voluntarily broken up with Ryan Bailey. Sounds good, she said as she stared at an empty crisp packet floating across the sparse grass. Dylan rushed off the bench to grab the packet and dropped it into the bin next to the bench. He flopped back to Nora, smiling. Nora understood what this other Nora saw in him. There's something pure about him. Like a dog himself. This one is titled, Why Want Another Universe If This One Has Dogs? That's sweet. I know, I kind of like him too. I mean, like, you can't just automatically, like, pick up where you left off, but he sounds like a good guy. The restaurant was on Castle Road, around the corner from String Theory, and they had to walk past the shop to get there. The familiarity of it felt strange. When she reached the shop, she saw something wasn't right. There were no guitars in the window. There was nothing in the window except a faded piece of A4 paper stuck on the inside of the glass. She recognized Neil's handwriting. Alas, String Theory is no longer able to trade in these premises. Due to an increase in rent, we simply couldn't afford to go on. Thanks to all our loyal customers. Don't think twice. It's all right. You can go your own way. Ah, God only knows what we'll be without you. Dylan was amused. I see what they did there. Then a moment later, I was named after Bob Dylan. Did I ever tell you that? I can't remember. You know, the musician. Yes, I have heard of Bob Dylan, Dylan. My older sister is called Suzanne, after the Leonard Cohen song. Nora smiled. My parents loved Leonard Cohen. Ever been in there? Dylan asked her. It looked like a great shop. Once or twice. Thought you would have been, what with you being musical. You used to play the piano, didn't you? Used to. Yeah. Keyboards. A little. Nora saw the notice looked old. She remembered what Neil had said to her. I can't pay you to put off customers with your face looking like a wet weekend. Well, Neil, maybe it wasn't my face after all. They carried on walking. Dylan, do you believe in parallel universes? He shrugged. I think so. What do you think you're doing in another life? Do you think this is a good universe? Or would you rather be in a universe where you left Bedford? Not really. I'm happy here. Why want another universe if this one has dogs? Dogs are the same here as they are in London. I had a place, you know. I'd gotten to Glasgow University to do veterinary medicine. And I went for a week, but I missed my dogs too much. Then my dad lost his job and couldn't really afford for me to go. So yeah, I never got to be a vet. And I really wanted to be a vet. But I don't regret it. I have a good life. I've got some good friends. I've got my dogs. Nora smiled. She liked Dylan, even if she doubted she could be attracted to him as this other Nora. He was a good person, and good people were rare. As they reached the restaurant, they saw a tall, dark-haired man in running gear jogging towards them. It took a disorienting moment for Nora to realize it was Ash. The Ash who had been a surgeon, the Ash who had been a customer at String Theory and who had asked her out for coffee, the Ash who had comforted her in the hospital and who had knocked on her door in another world last night to tell her that Voltaire was dead. It seemed so recent, that memory, and yet it was hers alone. He was obviously doing some training for the half marathon on Sunday. There was no reason to believe that Ash in this life was any different from the one in her root life, except chances were that he probably hadn't found a dead Voltaire last night. Or maybe he had, though Voltaire wouldn't have been called Voltaire. Hi, she said, forgetting which timeline she was in. And Ash smiled back at her, but it was a confused smile. Confused but kind, which somehow made Nora feel even more cringy. Because, of course, in this life, there had not been the knock on her door, and there had never even been the ask for coffee, or the purchase of a Simon and Garfunkel songbook. Who's that? Dylan asked. Oh, just someone I knew in another life. Dylan was confused, but shook it away like rain. And then they were there. We have dinner with Dylan. La Cantina had hardly changed in years. Did I say Cantina or Cantina? La Cantina. Okay. What's your theory? What's going on? I'll wait before we continue. Alright, car. Maybe. I mean, it seems like, he's been, not prominent, but, like, he's popped up a few times, so I wouldn't, like, be surprised if that crossed her mind at least. Or, I mean, she could see that she maybe says yes that one time, but it's actually not the right time, and then she will be back in her root life and be able to talk to him again now. We'll have to see about it. Well, I know that it's Cantina. Oh, yeah, so Cantina. I know Cantina. But I'm pronouncing it with the Spanish pronunciation because it's La Cantina. So... La Cantina had hardly changed in years. Nora had a flashback to the evening she had taken Dan there years ago on his first visit to Bedford. They'd sat at a table in a corner and had too many margaritas and talked about their joint future. It was the first time that Dan had expressed his dream of living in a pub in the country. They had been on the verge of moving in together, just as Nora and Dylan apparently were in this life. Now she remembered it. Dan had been pretty rude to the waiter, and Nora had overcompensated with excessive smiles. Oh boy, have I been there. It was one of life's rules. Never trust someone who is willingly rude to low-paid service staff, and Dan had failed at that one, and many of the others. Although Nora had to admit La Cantina would not have been her top choice to return to. I love this place, Dylan said now, looking around at the busy, garish red and yellow decor. Nora wondered quietly if there was any place Dylan didn't or wouldn't love. He seemed like he would be able to sit in a field near Chernobyl and marvel at the beautiful scenery. Hey, you gotta be an optimist in this life. Over black bean tacos, they talked about dogs and school. Dylan had been 2 years below Nora and remembered her primarily as the girl who was good at swimming. He even remembered the school assembly, which Nora had long tried to repress, where she had been called on stage and given a certificate for being an exceptional representative of Hazeldean Comp. Now she thought about it, that was possibly the moment Nora had begun to go off swimming. The moment she found it harder being with her friends. The moment she slunk away into the margins of school life. I used to see you in the library during breaks, he said, smiling at the memory. I remember seeing you playing chess with the librarian we used to have. What was her name? Mrs. Elm, Nora said. That's it, Mrs. Elm. And then he said something even more startling. I saw her the other day. Did you? Yeah, she was on Shakespeare Road, with someone dressed in a uniform, like a nurse's outfit. I think she was heading into the care home after a walk. She looked very frail, very old. For some reason, Nora had assumed Mrs. Elm had died years ago, and that the version of Mrs. Elm she always saw in the library had made that idea more likely, as that version was always the exact version she had been at school, preserved in Nora's memory like a mosquito in amber. Oh no, poor Mrs. Elm. I loved her. That's always so strange and abstract when you have people who make an impact in your life, but then they're, like, not there anymore. Or, like, maybe not even make an impact, but, like, that you just remember. So, an old school teacher, for example. But you always remember them as they were when you knew them. Even though, of course, by now they must have aged. And I think it'd be so weird and awkward to, like, weird and awkward even, I would say, to see them as they are now, or to find out something about, like, if they passed away. Like, if they passed away, the thought would still be like, oh, but they were so young, and it's like, they were young when you knew them, but time goes on. I feel like our memories are kind of, like, ways to preserve time, if that makes sense. It's really strange and a little sad. The next section is called Last Chance Saloon. After the meal, Nora went back to Dylan's house to watch the Ryan Bailey movie. They had a half-drunk bottle of wine that the restaurant had let them take home. Her self-justification regarding going to Dylan's was that he was sweet and open and would reveal a lot about their life, and without having to pry too deep. He lived in a small terraced house on Huxley Avenue that he had inherited from his mum. The house was made even smaller by the amount of dogs there. There were 5 that Nora could see, although there may have been more lurking upstairs. Nora had always imagined she liked the smell of dog, but she suddenly realized there was a limit to this fondness. Sitting down on the sofa, she felt something hard beneath her, a plastic ring for the dogs to gnaw on. She put it on the carpet, amid the other chew toys. The toy bone. The foam yellow ball with chunks bitten out of it. A half-massacred soft toy. A chihuahua with contacts. A chihuahua with cataracts tried to have sex with her right leg. That was sudden. Stop that, Pedro, said Dylan, laughing as he pulled the little creature away from her. Another dog, a giant, meaty, chestnut-colored Newfoundland, was sitting next to her on the sofa, licking Nora's ear with a tongue the size of a slipper, meaning that Dylan had to sit on the floor. Do you want the sofa? Nah, I'm fine on the floor. Nora didn't push it. In fact, she was quite relieved. It made it easier to watch Last Chance Saloon without any further awkwardness, and the Newfoundland stopped licking her ear and rested its head on her knee, and Nora felt, well, not happy exactly, but not depressed either. And yet, as she watched Ryan Bailey tell his on-screen love interest that life is for living, Cupcake, while simultaneously wait, what? Oh, okay, sorry, I was reading that wrong. And yet, as she watched Ryan Bailey tell his on-screen love interest that life is for living, Cupcake, while simultaneously being informed by Dylan that he was thinking of letting another dog sleep in his bed, he cries all night. He wants his daddy. Nora realized she wasn't too enamored with this life. And also Dylan deserved the other Nora, the one who had managed to fall in love with him. This was a new feeling, as if she was taking someone's place. Realizing she had a high tolerance for alcohol in this life, she poured herself some more wine. It was a pretty ropey Zinfandel from California. She stared at the label on the back. There was, for some reason, a mini autobiography of a woman and a man, Janine and Terrence Thornton, who owned the vineyard which had made the wine. She read the last sentence. When we were first married, we always dreamed of opening our own vineyard one day, and now we have made that dream a reality. Here at Dry Creek Valley, our life tastes as good as a glass of Zinfandel. She stroked the large dog who'd been licking her and whispered a goodbye into the Newfoundland's wide, warm brow as she left Dylan and his dogs behind. So, I mean, it makes sense that she left. I feel like it's got to be very hard to just jump into a new life, you know, or like a place where you have that history, but none of the memories or anything to go along with it. I mean, because you have to think about it, right? Like, the further back the choice was made, like, obviously there'd be more different. Well, missing time is, like, dissociating. I guess you could, like, you know, like, check into someplace else. Or, like, do you mean, like, you're checking into someplace else, or someone else is checking into your body during that time, and then... Both of those are interesting. Never mind. This next section is called Buena Vista Vineyard. In the next visit to the Midnight Library, Mrs. Elm helped Nora to find the life she could have lived that was closest to the life depicted on the label of that bottle of wine from the restaurant. So she gave Nora a book that sent her to America. In this life, Nora was called Nora Martinez, and she was married to a twinkle-eyed Mexican-American man in his early 40s called Eduardo, who she had met during a gap year she'd regretted never having after leaving university. After his parents had died in a boating accident, she had learned from a profile piece on them in the Wine Enthusiast magazine, which they had framed in their oak-paneled tasting room. Eduardo had been left a modest inheritance, and they bought a tiny vineyard in California. Within 3 years, they had done so well, particularly with their Syrah varietals. They were able to buy the neighboring vineyard when it came up for sale. The winery was called Buena Vista Vineyard, situated in the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and they had a child named Alejandro, who was at a boarding school near Monterey Bay. Much of their business came from wine trail tourists. Coachloads of people arrived at hourly intervals. It was quite easy to improvise, as the tourists... Oh, I forgot to close my mail, so I got a notification that came in. Let me just go ahead and close out now, so we get no more dings. Okay, so it's quite easy to improvise, as the tourists were genuinely quite gullible. It went like this. Eduardo would decide which wines to put out in the glasses before each coachload arrived, and hand Nora the bottles. Oh, Nora, despacio, un poco too much. he reprimanded in his good-humored Spanglish, which was a bit too liberal with the measures, and then, when the tourists came, Nora would inhale the wines as they sipped and swilled them, and try to echo Eduardo and say the right things. There is a woodiness to the bouquet with this one, where you'll note the vegetal aromas here, the bright, robust blackberries and fragrant nectarine perfectly balanced with the echoes of charcoal. Each life she'd experienced had a different feeling, like different movements in a symphony, and this one felt quite bold and uplifting. Eduardo was incredibly sweet-natured, and their marriage seemed to be a successful one, maybe even one to rival the life of the couple on the wine label of the bottle of ropey wine she drank with Dylan, while being licked by his astronomically large dog. She even remembered their names, Janine and Terence Thornton. She felt like she too was now living in a label on a bottle. She also looked like it. Perfect Californian hair and expensive-looking teeth, tanned and healthy despite the presumably quite substantial consumption of Syra. She had the kind of flat, hard stomach that suggested hours of Pilates every week. However, it wasn't just easy to fake wine knowledge in this life. It was easy to fake everything, which could have been a sign that the key to her apparently successful union with Eduardo was that he wasn't really paying attention. After the last of the tourists left, Eduardo and Nora sat out under the stars with a glass of their own wine in their hands. "The fires have died out in LA now," he told her. Nora wondered who lived in the Los Angeles home she had in her pop star life. "That's a relief." "Yeah." "Isn't it beautiful?" she asked him, staring up at the clear sky full of constellations. "What?" "The galaxy." "Yes." He was on his phone and didn't say very much. And then he put the phone down and still didn't say very much. She had known 3 types of silence in relationships. There was passive-aggressive silence, obviously. There was the "we no longer have anything to say" silence. And then there was the silence that Eduardo and she seemed to have cultivated. The silence of not needing to talk. Of just being together. Of together being. The way you could be happily silent with yourself. But still she wanted to talk. "We're happy, aren't we?" "Why the question?" "Oh, I know we are happy. I just like to hear you say it sometimes." "We're happy, Nora." She sipped her wine and looked at her husband. He was wearing a sweater even though it was perfectly mild. They stayed there a while and then he went to bed before her. "I'm just going to stay out here for a while." Eduardo seemed fine with that and sloped off after planting a small kiss on the top of her head. She stepped out with her glass of wine and walked among the moonlit vines. She stared at the clear sky full of stars. There was absolutely nothing wrong with this life, but she felt inside her a craving for other things, other lives, other possibilities. She felt like she was still in the air, not ready to land. Maybe she was more like Hugo Lefebvre. Maybe she was more like Hugo Lefebvre than she realized. Maybe she could flick through lives as easily as flicking pages. She gulped the rest of the wine, knowing there would be no hangover. "Earth and wood," she said to herself. She closed her eyes. It wasn't long now. Not long at all. She just stood there and waited to disappear. The Many Lives of Nora Seed. Nora came to understand something Hugo had never fully explained to her in that kitchen in Svalbard. You didn't have to enjoy every aspect of each life to keep having the option of experiencing them. You just had to never give up on the idea that there would be a life somewhere that could be enjoyed. Equally, enjoying a life didn't mean you stayed in that life. You only stayed in life for forever if you couldn't imagine a better one. And yet, paradoxically, the more lives you tried, the easier it became to think of something better as the imagination broadened a bit more with every new life she sampled. So in time, and with Mrs. Elm's assistance, Nora took lots of books from the shelves and ended up having a taste of lots of different lives in her search for the right one. She learned that undoing regrets was really a way of making wishes come true. There was almost any life she was living in one universe, after all. In one life, she had quite a solitary time in Paris and taught English at a college in Montparnasse? I can't. Why do they keep doing this to me with the French? I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking. Montparnasse. Okay. Alright. Thank you. They can't, like, it's always French. The other things I've got. And taught English at a college in Montparnasse and cycled by the sea. By the Seine? Seine? Is it scene or is it sign? Why are they doing this to me? I really feel like this writer just really likes France and French, and that's fine, but, like, they have been, so far, the most detailed about all the French stuff, so. No, you need to help me. I feel like we've heard this word before. I'm pretty sure Hugo mentioned it, now that I think about it. Let's see. How to pronounce.
It's bloody Sen, okay?
Oh, Sen. Thank you, Mr. Exasperated video maker. Sen. Okay. And taught English at a college in Montparnasse and cycled by the Seine and read lots of books on park benches. In another, she was a yoga teacher with the neck mobility of an owl. In one life, she had kept up swimming, but had never tried to pursue the Olympics. She just did it for fun. In that life, she was a lifeguard in the beach resort of Sique, near Barcelona, was fluent in both Catalan and Spanish. So I'm thinking, like, Castilian, but, like, it's not spelled Castilian, it's Catalan. And Spanish. And had a hilarious best friend called Gabriela, who taught her how to surf, and who she shared an apartment with 5 minutes from the beach. There was one existence where Nora had kept up the fiction writing she had occasionally toyed with at university, and was now a published author. Her novel, The Shape of Regret, received rave reviews, and was shortlisted for a major literary award. In that life, she had lunch in a disappointingly banal Soho members club with two affable, easygoing producers from Magic Lantern Productions who wanted to option it for a film. She ended up choking on a piece of flatbread and knocking her red wine over one of the producers' trousers and messing up the whole meeting. In one life, she had a teenage son called Henry, who she never met properly because he kept slamming doors in her face. In one life, she was a concert pianist, currently on tour in Scandinavia, playing night after night to besotted crowds and fading into the Midnight Library during one disastrous rendition of Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 2 at the Finlandia Hall in Helsinki. In one life, she only ate toast. Is there a universe full of shrimp? I feel like there has to be. In one life, she went to Oxford and became a lecturer in philosophy at St. Catherine's College and lived by herself in a fine Georgian townhouse in a genteel row amid an environment of respectable calm. In another life, Nora was a sea of emotion. She felt everything deeply and directly, every joy and every sorrow. A single moment could contain both intense pleasure and intense pain, as if both were dependent on each other, like a pendulum in motion. A simple walk outside, and she could feel a heavy sadness simply because the sun had slipped behind a cloud. Yet conversely, meeting a dog who was clearly grateful for her attention caused her to feel so exultant that she felt she could melt into the pavement with sheer bliss. You either have bipolar disorder here or borderline personality disorder. That's rough, buddy. In that life, she had a book of Emily Dickinson poems beside her bed, and she had a playlist called Extreme States of Euphoria, and another one called The Glue to Fix Me When I Am Broken. In one life, she was a travel vlogger who had 1,750,000 YouTube subscribers and almost as many people following her on Instagram, and her most popular video was one where she fell off a gondola in Venice. She also had one about Rome called Aromatherapy. Ha ha ha. Nora is me in this life. Well, except I don't have as many YouTube followers, but the puns are there. In one life, she was a single parent to babysit to a baby that literally wouldn't sleep. In one life, she ran the showbiz column in a tabloid newspaper and did stories about Ryan Bailey's relationships. In one life, she was the picture editor at the National Geographic. In one life, she was a successful eco-architect who lived a carbon-neutral existence in a self-designed bungalow that harvested rainwater and ran on solar power. In one life, she was an aid worker in Botswana. In one life, a cat sitter. In one life, a volunteer in a homeless shelter. In one life, she was sleeping on her only friend's sofa. In one life, she taught music in Montreal. In one life, she spent all day arguing with people she didn't know on Twitter and ended a fair proportion of her tweets by saying, "Do better," while secretly realizing she was telling herself to do that. In one life, she had no social media accounts. In one life, she'd never drunk alcohol. In one life, she was a chess champion and currently visiting Ukraine for a tournament. In one life, she was married to a minor royal and hated every minute. In one life, her Facebook and Instagram only contained quotes from Rumi and Lao Tzu. In one life, she was on to her third husband and already bored. In one life, she was a vegan powerlifter. In one life, she was traveling around South America and caught up in an earthquake in Chile. In one life, she had a friend called Becky who said, "Oh, what larks," whenever anything good was happening. In one life, she met Hugo yet again, diving off the Corsican coast, and they talked quantum mechanics and got drunk together at a beachside bar until Hugo slipped away out of that life mid-sentence, so Nora was left talking to a blank Hugo who was trying to remember her name. Yes. Oh, don't we all? In some lives, Nora attracted a lot of attention. In some lives, she attracted none. In some lives, she was rich. In some lives, she was poor. In some lives, she was healthy. In some lives, she couldn't climb the stairs without getting out of breath. In some lives, she was in a relationship. In others, she was solo. In many, she was somewhere in between. In some lives, she was a mother, but in most, she wasn't. She had been a rock star, an Olympian, a music teacher, a primary school teacher, a professor, a CEO, a PA, a chef, a glaciologist, a climatologist, an acrobat, a tree planter, an audit manager, a hairdresser, a professional dog walker, an office clerk, a software developer, a receptionist, a hotel cleaner, a politician, a lawyer, a shoplifter, the head of an ocean protection charity, a shop worker, again, a waitress, a first-line supervisor, a glassblower, and a thousand other things. She'd had horrendous commutes in cars, on buses and trains, on ferries, on bike, on foot. She'd had emails and emails and emails. She'd had a 53-year-old boss with halitosis touch her leg under a table and text her a photo of his penis. She'd had colleagues who lied about her, and colleagues who loved her, and mainly colleagues who were entirely indifferent. In many lives she chose not to work, and in some she didn't choose not to work, but still couldn't find any. In some lives she smashed through the glass ceiling, and in some she just polished it. She had been excessively over and underqualified. She had slept brilliantly and terribly. In some lives she was on antidepressants, and in others she didn't even take ibuprofen for a headache. In some lives she was a physically healthy hypochondriac, and in some a seriously ill hypochondriac, and in most she wasn't a hypochondriac at all. There was a life where she had chronic fatigue, a life where she had cancer, a life where she'd suffered a herniated disc and broken her ribs in a car accident. There had, in short, been a lot of lives. And among all those lives, she had laughed and cried and felt calm and terrified and everything in between. And between these lives, she always saw Mrs. Elm in the library. And at first it seemed that the more lives she experienced, the fewer problems there seemed to be with the transfer. The library never felt like it was on the brink of crumbling or falling apart or at risk of disappearing completely. The lights didn't even flicker through many of the changeovers. It was as though she had reached some state of acceptance about her life, that if there was a bad experience, there wouldn't only be bad experiences. She realized that she hadn't tried to end her life because she was miserable, but because she had managed to convince herself that there was no way out of her misery. That, she supposed, was the basis of depression, as well as the difference between fear and despair. Fear was when you wandered into a cellar and worried about that the door would close shut. Despair was when the door closed and locked behind you. But with every life, she saw that metaphysical door widen a little further as she grew better at using her imagination. Sometimes she was in a life for less than a minute, while in others she was there for days or weeks. It seemed the more lives she lived, the harder it was to feel at home anywhere. The trouble was that eventually Nora began to lose any sense of who she was. Like a whispered word passed around from ear to ear, even her name began to sound like just a noise, signifying nothing. "It's not working," she told Hugo in her last proper conversation with him in that beach bar in Corsica. "It's not fun anymore. I am not you. I need somewhere to stay, but the ground is never stable. The fun is in the jumping, mon ami. But what if it's in the landing?" And that was the moment he had returned to the Purgatorial video store. I'm sorry, his other self said as he sipped his wine and the sun set behind him. "I've forgotten who you are." "Don't worry," she said, "so have I." As she too faded away like the sun that had just been swallowed by the horizon. The next one is called Lost in the Library. "Mrs. Elm?" "Yes, Nora? What's the matter?" "It's dark. I had noticed." "That's not a good sign, is it?" "No," said Mrs. Elm, sounding flustered. "You know perfectly well it's not a good sign." "I can't go on. You always say that. I have run out of lives. I've been everything. And yet I always end up back here. There is always something that stops my enjoyment. Always. I feel ungrateful." "Well, you shouldn't. And you haven't run out of everything. You haven't run out of anything." Mrs. Elm paused to sigh. "Did you know that every time you choose a book, it never returns to the shelves?" "Yes, which is why you can never go back into a life you have tried. There always needs to be some variation on a theme. In the Midnight Library, you can't take the same book out twice." I don't follow." "Well, even in the dark, you know these shelves are full as the last time you looked. Feel them if you like." Nora didn't feel them. "Yeah, I know they are. They're exactly as full as they were when you first arrived here, aren't they?" That means there are still as many possible lives out there for you as there ever were. An infinite number, in fact. You can never run out of possibilities, but you can run out of wanting them. Oh, Nora. Oh, what? There was a pause in the darkness. Nora pressed the small light on her watch just to check. 0:00. "I think," Mrs. Elm said eventually, "if I may say so without being rude, I think you might have lost your way a little bit." "Isn't that why I came to the Midnight Library in the first place? Because I had lost my way?" "Well, yes, but now you are lost within your lostness, which is to say very lost indeed. You are not going to find the way you want to live like this. What if there was never a way? What if I am trapped? So long as there are still books on the shelves, you are never trapped. Every book is a potential escape." "I just don't understand life," sulked Nora. "You don't have to understand life. You just have to live it." Nora shook her head. This was a bit too much for a philosophy graduate to take. "But I don't want to be like this," Nora told her. "I don't want to be like Hugo. I don't want to keep flicking between lives forever." "All right. Then you need to listen carefully to me. Now, do you want my advice or not?" "Well, yeah, of course. It feels a little late, but yes, Mrs. Elm, I would be very grateful for your advice on this." "Right. Well, I think you have reached a point where you can't see the wood for the trees." "I'm not quite sure what you mean." "You are right to think of these lives like a piano where you're playing tunes that aren't really you. You are forgetting who you are. In becoming everyone, you are becoming no one. You are forgetting your root life. You are forgetting what worked for you and what didn't. You are forgetting your regrets. I've been through my regrets. No, not all of them. Well, not every single minor one, no, obviously. You need to look at the Book of Regrets again." "How can I do that in the pitch black?" "Because you already know the whole book. Because it's inside you, just as I am." She remembered Dylan telling her that he had seen Mrs. Elm near the care home. She thought about telling her this, but decided against it. Right. We only know what we perceive. Everything we experience is ultimately just our perception of it. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. You know Thoreau? Of course. If you do. The thing is, I don't know what I regret anymore. Okay, well, let's see. You say that I am just a perception. Then why did you perceive me? Why am I, Mrs. Elm, the person you see? I don't know. Because you were someone I trusted. You were kind to me. Kindness is a strong force, and rare. You might be looking in the wrong places. Maybe. The dark was punctured by the slow rising glow of the light bulbs all around the library. So where else in your root life have you felt that? Kindness. Nora remembered the night Ash knocked on her door. Maybe lifting a dead cat off the road and carrying it in the rain around to her flat's tiny back garden, and then burying it on her behalf because she was sobbing drunkenly with grief wasn't the most archetypically romantic thing in the world, but it certainly qualified as kind to take 40 minutes out of your run and help someone in need while only accepting a glass of water in return. She hadn't really been able to appreciate that kindness at the time. Her grief and despair had been too strong. But now she thought about it, it had really been quite remarkable. I think I know, she said. It was right there in front of me the night before I tried to kill myself. Yesterday evening, you mean? I suppose, yes. Ash, the surgeon, the one who found Volts, who once asked me out for coffee. Years ago, when I was with Dan. I'd said no, well, because I was with Dan, and gone on that coffee date and had dared on a Saturday with all the shop watching to say yes to a coffee. Because I was with Dan, sorry. But what if I hadn't been? What if I had broken up with Dan and had gone on that coffee date and had dared on a Saturday with all the shop watching to say yes to a coffee? Because there must be a life in which I was single at that moment, and where I said that I wanted to say, said what I wanted to say. Where I said, yes, I would like to go for a coffee sometime, Ash. That would be lovely. Where I picked Ash. I'd like to have a go at that life. Where would that have taken me? And in the dark, she heard the familiar sound of the shelves beginning to move, slowly, with a creak, then faster, smoother, until Mrs. Elm spotted the book, The Life, in question. Right there. Let me take some water. Hold on. It's funny, everybody's usernames are popping up as blue on my Streamlabs right now, so it's like it kind of looks like the same person talking, even though I know there's two people talking. You know what? I have this much water left. I should just finish it while I have it. Okay. So it's a pearl in the shell. Yeah, chug the water. The tiny, tiny little drop of water that was left. I'm just weird about finishing things sometimes, to be honest. Like, I've had when I was younger that, like, I would drink milk or whatever, or soda, and I'd drink most of it, and then it'd be like, this is a tiny bit at the end, and then I would get rid of it. And it didn't make any sense. I don't know why. And sometimes, like, I don't know, it was just really weird. I don't know. An aversion to finishing things, I guess. So, a pearl in the shell is what this section is called. She opened her eyes from a shallow sleep, and the first thing she noticed was that she was incredibly tired. She could see a picture on the wall in the dark. She could just about make out that the picture was a mildly abstract interpretation of a tree. Not a tall and spindly tree, something short and wide and flowery. There was a man next to her, asleep. It was impossible to tell, as he was turned away from her in the dark, and given that he was largely hidden under the duvet, whether this man was Ash. Somehow this felt weirder than usual. Of course, to be in bed with a man who she hadn't done anything more with than bury a cat and have a few interesting conversations from behind the counter of a music shop should have felt slightly strange in the normal run of things. But since entering the Midnight Library, Nora had slowly gotten used to the peculiar. And just because it was possible that the man was Ash, it was also possible that it wasn't. There was no predicting every future outcome after a single decision. Going for a coffee with Ash might have led, for instance, to Nora falling in love with a person serving the coffee. That was simply the unpredictable nature of quantum physics. She felt a ring finger. 2 rings. The man turned over. An arm landed across her in the dark, and she gently raised it and placed it back on the duvet. Then she took herself out of bed. Her plan was to go downstairs and maybe lie on the sofa and, as usual, do some research about herself on her phone. It was a curious fact that no matter how many lives she had experienced, and no matter how many different lives there were, she almost always had her phone by her bed. And in this life, it was no different, so she grabbed it and sneaked out of the room quietly. Whoever the man was, he was a deep sleeper and didn't stir. She stared at him. "Nora?" he mumbled, half asleep. It was him. She was almost sure of it. "Ash. I'm just going to the loo," she said. He mumbled something close to an "okay," and fell back asleep. And she trod gently across the floorboards, but the moment she opened the door and stepped out of the room, she nearly jumped out of her skin. For there, in front of her in the half-light of the landing, was another human. A small one. Child size. "Mummy, I had a nightmare." By the soft light of the dimmed bulb in the hallway, she could see the girl's face, her fine hair, wild from sleep, strands sticking to her clammy forehead. Nora said nothing. This was her daughter. How could she say anything? The now familiar question raised itself. How could she just join into a life that she was years late for? Nora closed her eyes. The other lives in which she'd had children had only lasted a couple of minutes or so. This one was already leading into unknown territory. Her body shook with whatever she was trying to keep inside. She didn't want to see her. Not just for herself, but for the girl as well. It seemed a betrayal. Nora was her mother, but also, in another, more important way, she was not her mother. She was just a strange woman in a strange house looking at a strange child. "Mummy? Can you hear me? I had a nightmare." She heard the man move in his bed somewhere in the room, behind her. This would only become more awkward if he woke up properly, so Nora decided to speak to the child. Oh, that's a shame," she whispered. "It's not real, though. It was just a dream. It was about bears." Nora closed the door behind her. "Bears? Because of that story." "Right. Yes. The story. Come on, get back in your bed." This sounded harsh, she realized. "Sweetheart," she added, wondering what she, her daughter in this universe, was called. "There are no bears here. Only teddy bears." "Yes, only—" The girl became a little more awake. Her eyes brightened. She saw her mother, so for a second, Nora felt like that. Like her mother. She felt the strangeness of being connected to the world through someone else. "Mommy, what are you doing? What were you doing?" She was speaking loudly. She was deeply serious in the way that only 4-year-olds, she couldn't have been much older, could be. "Shh," Nora said. She really needed to know the girl's name. Names had power. If you didn't know your own daughter's name, you had no control whatsoever. "Listen," Nora whispered. "I'm just going to go downstairs and do something. You go back to bed." "But the bears." "There aren't any bears." "There are in my dreams." Nora remembered the polar bear speeding towards her in the fog. Remembered that fear, that desire, and the sudden moment to live. "There won't be this time. I promise." "Mummy, why are you speaking like that?" "Like what?" "Like that." Whispering? No. Nora had no idea what the girl thought she was speaking like. What the gap was between her now and the mother. Did motherhood affect the way you spoke? "Like you're scared," the girl clarified. "I'm not scared." "I want someone to hold my hand." "What?" "I want someone to hold my hand." "Right. Silly Mummy." Yes, I'm silly." "I'm really scared." She said this quietly, matter of fact, and it was then that Nora looked at her, really properly looked at her. The girl seemed wholly alien and wholly familiar all at once. Nora felt a swell of something inside her, something powerful and worrying. The girl was staring at her in a way no one had stared at her before. It was scary, the emotion. She had Nora's mouth, and that slightly lost look that people sometimes attributed to her. She was beautiful, and she was hers, or kind of hers. And she felt a swell of irrational love, a surge of it, and knew, if the library wasn't coming for her right now, and it wasn't, that she had to get away. "Mommy, will you hold my hand? The girl put her hand in Nora's. It felt so small and warm, and it made her feel sad, the way it relaxed into her, as natural as a pearl in a shell. She pulled Nora towards the adjacent room, the girl's bedroom. Nora closed the door nearly shut behind her and tried to check the time on her watch, but in this life it was a classic-looking analog watch with no light display, so it took a second or two for her eyes to adjust. She double-checked the time on her phone as well. It was 2:32 a.m., so depending when she had gone to bed in this life, this version of her body hadn't had much sleep. It certainly felt like it hadn't. "What happens when you die, Mummy?" It was totally dark in the room. There was a sliver of light coming in from the hallway, and there was a nearby street lamp that meant a thin glow filtered through the dog-patterned curtains. She could see the squat rectangle that was Nora's bed. She could see the silhouette of a cuddly toy elephant on the floor. There were other toys too. It was a happily cluttered room. Her eyes shone at Nora. "I don't know," Nora said. "I don't think anyone knows for sure." She frowned. This didn't satisfy her. One bit. "Listen," Nora said, "there is a chance that just before you die, you'll get a chance to live again. You can have things you didn't have before. You can choose the life you want." "That sounds good. But you don't have to have this worry for a very long time. You are going to have a life full of exciting adventures. There'll be so many happy things. Like camping!" A burst of warmth radiated through Nora as she smiled at this sweet girl. "Yes, like camping. I love it when we go camping." Nora's smile was still there, but she felt tears behind her eyes. This seemed like a good life. A family of her own. A daughter to go on camping holidays with. "Listen," she said, as she realized she wasn't going to be able to escape the bedroom anytime soon. "When you have worries about things that you don't know about, like the future, it's a very good idea to remind yourself of things you do know." "I don't understand," the girl said, snuggled under her duvet as Nora sat on the floor beside her. "Well, it's like a game." "I like games." "Shall we play a game?" "Yes," smiled her daughter. "Let's." Yeah. That is where I have us set to end. But if you want, I can continue. I have luckily never seen a bear outside of a zoo, so I'm not as afraid of bears. Aw. Yeah, I haven't. I'm happy with that. I'm content. I don't have to see a bear outside of the zoo. Oh, so you very nearly saw another big bear. Okay. Alright, we can continue. This section is called The Game, which you all lost, by the way, just to let you know. I ask you something we already know, and you say the answer. So if I ask, what is Mummy's name, you would say Nora. Get it? I think so. So, what is your name? Molly. Okay, what is Daddy's name? Daddy. But what is his actual name? Ash. Well, that was a really successful coffee date. Aw. And where do we live? Cambridge. Cambridge. It kind of made sense. Nora had always liked Cambridge, and it was only 30 miles from Bedford. Ash must have liked it too, and it was still commutable distance from London, if he still worked there. Briefly after getting her first from Bristol, she had applied to do an MPhil. I don't know what that is. It must be, well, obviously it's a British degree of sorts. An MPhil in philosophy, and had been offered a place at Caius College. What part of Cambridge? Can you remember? What is our street called? We live on Bolton Road. Well done! And do you have any brothers or sisters? No! And do Mummy and Daddy like each other? Molly laughed a little at that. Yes! Do we ever shout? The laugh became cheeky. Sometimes. Especially Mummy. Sorry. You only shout when you were really, really, really tired, and you say sorry, so it's okay. Everything is okay if you say sorry. That's what you say. Does Mummy go out to work? Yes, sometimes. Do I still work at the shop where I met Daddy? No. What does Mummy do when she goes out to work? Teaches people. How do I teach people? What do I teach? Philosophy. Philosophy? That's what I said. And where do I teach that? At a university? Yes. Which university? Then she remembered where they lived. At Cambridge University? That's it. She tried to fill in the gaps. Maybe in this life she had reapplied to do a master's, and on successfully completing that, she had gotten to teaching there. Either way, if she was going to bluff it in this life, she was probably going to have to read some more philosophy. But then Molly said, "But you are stopping now." Stopping? Why am I stopping? To do books. Books for you? No, silly. To do a grown-up book. I'm writing a book? Yes, I just said. I know, I'm just trying to get you to say some things twice. Because it is doubly nice, and it makes bears even less scary, okay? Okay. Does Daddy work? Yes. Do you know what Daddy's job is? Yes, he cuts people. For a brief moment, she forgot Ash was a surgeon and wondered if she was in the house of a serial killer. Cuts people? Yes, he cuts people's bodies and makes them better. Ah, yes, of course. He saves people. Yes, he does. Except when he is sad and the person died. Yes, that is sad. Does Daddy work in Bedford's... Oh, sorry. Oh, I guess this is also Nora. It looks like the quotations end from yes he does, and that, from yes that is sad. And then a new set of quotations begins at does Daddy work in Bedford still? So that was a little confusing. I don't know why, like, that hasn't happened very often in the book, but it has happened a couple of times, and I wonder if it's an editing thing, and I wouldn't have necessarily done it that way. It's a little confusing. But, yeah. Does Daddy work in Bedford still, or does he work in Cambridge now? She shrugged. Cambridge? Does he play music? Yes. Yes, he plays music, but very, 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 very badly. She giggled as she said that. Nora laughed too. Molly's giggle was contagious. Do you have any aunts and uncles? Yes, I have Auntie Jaya. Who is Auntie Jaya? Daddy's sister. Anyone else? Yes, Uncle Joe and Uncle Ewan. Nora felt relieved when her brother was alive in this timeline, and that he was with the same man he was with in her Olympic life. And he was clearly in their lives lives enough for Molly to know his name. When did we last see Uncle Joe? Christmas. Do you like Uncle Joe? Yes, he's funny, and he gave me Panda. Panda? My best cuddly. Pandas are bears too. Nice bears. Molly yawned. She was getting sleepy. Do Mummy and Uncle Joe like each other? Yes, you always talk on the phone. This was interesting. Nora had assumed that the only lives in which she still got on with her brother were the lives in which she had never been in the labyrinths. Unlike her decision to keep swimming, the coffee date with Ash post-dated her experience in the labyrinths. But this was throwing that theory. Nora couldn't help but wonder if this lovely Molly herself was the missing link. Maybe this little girl in front of her had healed the rift between her and her brother. Do you have grandparents? Only Grandma Sal. Nora wanted to ask more about her own parents' deaths, but this probably wasn't the time. Are you happy? I mean, when you aren't thinking about bears? I think so. Are Mummy and Daddy happy? Yes, she said slowly. Sometimes. When you're not tired. And do we have lots of fun times? She rubbed her eyes. Yes. And do we have any pets? Yes, Play-Doh. And who is Play-Doh? Our dog. And what type of dog is Play-Doh? But she got no answer, because Molly was asleep, and Nora lay there on the carpet and closed her eyes. When she woke up, a tongue was licking her face. A Labrador with smiling eyes and a waggy tail seemed amused or excited to see her. Play-Doh? She asked sleepily. That's me, Play-Doh seemed to wag. It was morning. Light flooded through the curtains now. Cuddly toys, including Panda and the elephant Nora had identified earlier, littered the floor. She looked at the bed and saw it empty. Molly wasn't in the room, and there were feet, heavier feet than Molly's, coming up the stairs. She sat up and knew she must look terrible after sleeping on the carpet in a baggy Cure t-shirt, which she recognized, and tartan pajama pants, which she didn't. She felt her face, and it was creased from where she had been lying, and her hair, which was longer in this life, felt dirty and bedraggled. She tried to make herself look as presentable as possible, to look in the 2 seconds before the arrival of a man she simultaneously slept with every night and also hadn't ever slept with. Schrodinger's husband, so to speak. And then, suddenly, he was there. Perhaps we will end here for today. You know what? We can go on for one more section. That was very quick. I like the Schrodinger's husband thing. Also, I can't help but think that if they're married and have like a 4-year-old daughter, and like, I don't think he's gonna really care if you're presentable enough. Or presentable or not, rather. Aw, we still have a bit to go. I know it doesn't look... Okay, I need to know where to point this to. I know it doesn't look like it's so much on camera, but come on. The stream only goes to 7, you know. I can read up to the next section and then we can discuss. Okay? Is that a good compromise? Will you settle for that? Okay. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. I am too. I need more water though. Hold on. You know, water actually does nothing for your vocal cords. And for your trachea, because that's where your water's coming. Not your trachea. Why can't I remember? No, it is trachea. Sorry, I was right. And for your trachea, because that's where your voice is coming out of. Your voice is coming out of that hole here, not your esophagus, where the water goes down. So it doesn't actually do too much for you. But, that said, it sure seems to help. I think, you know, where I'm thinking it probably does help is, like, right at the tippity top of that area. The water probably rushes over it, and so it's a similar area where the air would also rush over. So that is probably getting worn, and the water is probably rushing over that area and helping cool it down a little bit. But obviously the vocal cords and everything deeper down and stuff, it's not doing anything for that. I don't know the exact physiology of it, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Okay. The perfect life. Ash's gangly, handsome boyishness had only been modestly dented by fatherhood. If anything, he looked healthier than he had done on her doorstep, and like then, he was wearing running gear. Though here, the clothes seemed a bit fancier and more expensive, and he had some kind of fitness tracker attached to his arm. He was smiling and holding 2 cups of coffee, one of which was for Nora. She wondered how many coffees they had shared together since the first. "Oh, thank you." "Oh no, Nora, did you sleep in here all night?" he asked. "Nor. Most of it. I mean, I meant to go back to bed, but Molly was in a state. I had to calm her, and then I was too tired to move." "Oh no. I'm so sorry, I didn't hear her." He seemed genuinely sad. It was probably my fault. I showed her some bears on YouTube yesterday before work. No worries. Anyway, I've walked Plato. I'm not in the hospital till midday today. It's going to be a late one. Are you still wanting to go into the library today? Oh, you know what? I might give it a miss. Okay, well, I got Moll some brekkie, and we'll drop her off at school. I can take Molly, said Nora, if you've got a big day. Oh, it's an okay one. A gallbladder and a pancreas so far. Easy street. I'm going to get a run in. Right. Yes. Of course, for the half marathon on Sunday. What? Nothing. It doesn't matter, Nora said. I'm just delirious from sleeping on the floor. No worries. Anyway, my sister phoned. They want her to illustrate the calendar for Kew Gardens. Lots of plants. She's really pleased. He smiled. He seemed happy for this sister of his who Nora had never heard of. She wanted to thank him for being so good about her dead cat, but she obviously couldn't, so she just said, "Thank you." For what? Just, everything. Oh. Right. Okay. So, thank you. He nodded. That's nice. Anyway, run time. He drained his coffee and then disappeared. Nora scanned the room, absorbing every new piece of information, every cuddly toy and book and plug socket as if they were all part of the jigsaw of her life. An hour later, Molly was being dropped off at her infant school and Nora was doing the usual, checking her emails and social media. Her social media activity wasn't great in this life, which was always a promising sign, but she did have a hell of a lot of emails. From these emails, she divined that she was not simply stopping teaching at the moment, but had officially stopped. She was on a sabbatical in order to write a book about Henry David Thoreau and his relevance for the modern-day environmentalist movement. Later in the year, she planned to visit Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts, funded by a research grant. This seemed pretty good. Almost annoyingly good. A good life with a good daughter and a good man and a good house and a good town. It was an excess of good. A life where she could sit down all day reading and researching and writing about her all-time favorite philosopher. This is cool, she told the dog. Isn't this cool? Plato yawned in indifference. Then she set about exploring her house, being watched by the Labrador from the comfy-looking sofa. The living room was vast, her feet sunk into the soft rug. White floorboards, TV, wood burner, electric piano, 2 new laptops on charge, a mahogany chest on which perched an ornate chess set, nicely stacked bookshelves, a lovely guitar resting in the corner. Nora recognized the model instantly as an electroacoustic midnight satin Fender Malibu. She had sold one during her last week working at String Theory. There were photos and frames dotted around the living room. Kids she didn't know with a woman who looked like Ash, presumably his sister. An old photo of her deceased parents on their wedding day, and one of her and Ash getting married. She could see her brother in the backyard, a photo of Plato, and one of a baby, presumably Molly. She glanced at the books, some yoga manuals, but not the second-hand ones she owned in her root life. Some medical books. She recognized her copy of Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy, along with Henry David Thoreau's Walden, both of which she'd owned since university. A familiar Principles of Geology was also there. There were quite a few books on Thoreau, and copies of Plato's Republic and Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism, which she did own in her root life, but not in these editions. Intellectual-looking books by people like Julia Kristeva and Judith Butler and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I will just hope that I pronounced everything right, but there were a lot of books on Eastern philosophy that she had never read before, and she wondered if she stayed in this life, and she couldn't see why not. Whether there was a way to read them all before she had to do any more teaching at Cambridge. Novels, some Dickens, The Bell Jar, some geeky pop science books, a few music books, a few parenting manuals, Nature by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, some stuff on climate change, and a large hardback called Arctic Dreams, Imaginations and Desire in a Northern Landscape. She had rarely, if ever, been this consistently highbrow. This was clearly what happened when you did a master's degree at Cambridge and then went on sabbatical to write a book about your favorite philosopher. You're impressed by me, she told the dog. You can admit it. There was also a pile of music songbooks, and Nora smiled when she saw that one on top was the Simon and Garfunkel one she had sold to Ash on the day that he had asked her out for a coffee. On the coffee table there was a nice glossy hardback book of photographs of Spanish scenery, and on the sofa there was something called The Encyclopedia of Plants and Flowers. And in the magazine rack, there was the brand new National Geographic with a picture of the black hole on the cover. There was a picture on the wall, a Miro print from a museum in Barcelona. Have me and Ash been to Barcelona together, Plato? She imagined them both, hand in hand, wandering the streets of the Gothic Quarter together, popping into a bar for tapas and Rioja. On the wall opposite the bookshelves, there was a mirror, a broad mirror with an ornate white frame. She no longer got surprised by the variations in appearance between lives. She had been every shape and size and had every haircut. In this life, she looked perfectly pleasant. She would have liked to be friends with this person. It wasn't an Olympian or a rock star or a Cirque du Soleil acrobat that she was looking at, but it was someone who seemed to be having a good life, as far as you could tell these things. A grown-up who had a vague idea of who she was and what she was doing in life. Short hair, but not dramatically so, skin looking healthier than in her root life, either through diet or a lack of red wine, exercise, or the cleaners, or the cleansers and moisturizers she'd seen in the bathroom, which were all the more expensive than anything she owned in her root life. Well, she said to Plato, this is a nice... Yeah, I can't read now. It's a good time we stop. Well, she said to Plato, this is a nice life, yeah? Plato seemed to agree. And that's where we will end for today. Let me go ahead and put that in here. What are your thoughts? Tell me about it. Yeah, it does seem like she's happy here. Sorry, my eyes kind of bother me. Yeah, I think so too. A professor here, and also just getting to actually do more research on and write about Henry David Thoreau. It's there in almost every one of her lives. Or, like, the lives where she's like, well... It's there in almost every one of her lives in that whether it's, like, actually a prominent part of her actual life, it's something she thinks about. So, yeah, I agree. Okay, Siri, this is not time. Siri decided to be like, what? You called? I did not call. I wonder how she's gonna feel, because I feel like she's gonna start feeling like she doesn't belong here because there's so much that she's missed. You know? Even though they have Molly, and Molly's amazing, like, she missed giving birth to Molly. Like, she missed getting married to Ash. She missed dating Ash. Which, that in itself was probably nice. I think that she's... Well, I wonder if she'll go back to her root life and actually just try to ask him out in that timeline. Yeah. I feel like that's probably what's going to happen here, is that she's going to be like, you know, she wants to try it in the life that she'd already lived up to this point. Because I don't think, you know, I don't think that the nail is in the coffin for that. I don't think that Ash would be like, unless Ash is already involved with someone in the root life, I don't think he'd, like, necessarily say no if he, you know, came and actually helped with Voltaire like he did and stuff, so you never know. You never know. She'd have to get to know him again. But she didn't really get to know him at all in the first place. But that's, like, the part of it, the not knowing. It can be exciting. Like, deal with what you've, you know, had. This is stuff that she's been thinking about, this idea that she was convinced that there was no way out of misery, and that's what made her feel worse about things. But now that she knows that that's not true, or now that she's starting to understand that that's not true, I think it might be help. It might help. Yeah. I think so too. I agree. Do we have anything else we want to talk about? I'm excited. Oh yeah, what's the next chapter called? I'm curious, because I can't remember. A spiritual quest for a deeper connection with the universe. Cool. I am going to put up a poll, at some point soon. I'm going to try to figure out where I'm going to put up this poll for the next book that we'll be doing. I'll try to put it on Twitter. What I would like to do, though, is to, brain is not working. I would like to put up, like, the synopses of the books, or the blurbs, rather, of the books that I'm considering, because this way you get some more info about what you're choosing between. But that can't be done on Twitter, because Twitter does have a character limit, and I'm pretty sure that the synopses would, or the blurbs, would overpass that. Like, one of the synopses would overpass that. So I might put up a poll on Twitter, but also maybe write up something on, like, Tumblr that has the synopses, and I'll link to that. Genre, I mean, I'm pretty open. I like big things. Like, so what I have off the top of my head that I can say is I like fiction, science fiction, fantasy. Yeah, I could. I might just, post it there. Like I said, I'll probably post it all to one document, maybe on Tumblr, and then link to that Tumblr post on the on Twitter. But I'll think about that in a little bit, and keep everybody up to date on social media and stuff. What was I saying? For the genres, yeah, pretty much open to, like, a lot of stuff. Romance, I don't really want to be, like, the main focus of a thing. If there is, like, a romantic relationship in the story, that is totally fine. But I want, like, bigger stories, So, yeah, that's what I'll end up doing. And, again, I'll post about it on social media, to let you guys know where polls are and everything. Just, keep up to date, keep watching. And that will be going up soon. And yeah, next week we'll continue with the Midnight Library. I don't know if we'll finish. I'm wondering. We might finish either next week or the week after. So, because we have too much to finish now. Again, I don't know which way to put it on. Too much to finish now, but not a lot, at all. So, I would say next week or the week after is when we'll, finish that. And it's been fun. On Saturday at 5 p.m., of course, we'll be back with Hot to Full Boyfriend Holiday Star. So you can check in there. And then Sunday, we will be back again with Quoth the Author. And you stop that. We'll see what happens. Stop trying to make fetch happen, okay? Oh, what? Subscriber. Did something pop up? I didn't get anything. Oh, Subscribble. At least it's subscriber. I was like, what? Okay, yes. So go on and check that out. And then also, and my Twitter account has the same username as here, so it's Sky Destiny. Ignore the large amount of BTS stuff that's there. It just look the other way. But yeah, so that's that. Check me out on YouTube, where I'll be posting past episodes of Hot to Full Boyfriend and also this series. You can go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. And of course, click that little bell for the notifications. Yeah, same username as here, linked on my Twitch bio. Otherwise, have a great rest of the day and have an awesome week, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And this has been Sky. Bye-bye!